Okay. Last time we talked about this amazing discovery that Luigi Galvani made in regard to the electricity of dead frogs. And you remember the basic phenomenon. We ended last time with this experiment that Galvani did, where he simply hooked up with, say, a piece of, if you have a frog, drawing my frog here, you have him standing on his silver platter, and you stick into him here, say, a tin wire, and then as soon as you hook that to the plate, his leg muscles will start contracting, and you'll see the frog do a little dance on the silver platter. Now, Galvani had, now he only, I mean, he saw, I'd mentioned last time that he tried this on all kinds of animals, sheep and ox, sheep, and it worked on all of them. So the Galvani had this idea, well, somehow animals are like little Leyden jars, and you just have to sort of give a, connect the circuit, in effect. Connect one part of the frog through conductors to the other end of the frog, and that released this electricity that the animal has in it. Troy?
But then why do they have to be different materials?
Exactly. See, this is the one thing that Galvani discovered that he could not explain, was why in order to release this latent electricity that's in the animals of living, that is in animals, why in order to release it do you need to have two different metals? You know, say tin hooked up to one end of the frog and silver to the other. Seems like even if the plate here were made of tin and the whole thing were tin, it should work, because tin is a conductor. It would release this electricity that's in the frog. But that, Galvani discovered that didn't work. And he didn't have an explanation for that. But he still thought that what he was dealing with was electricity in the frog. And he even had the idea that somehow the nerves of the frog are positively electrified and the muscles are negative. And so when you give a complete path for the electricity, you know, it releases that, that imbalance of electricity in the frog gets released and causes the electricity to flow. Now, if electricity turns out to be really useful, we're going to need a lot of dead frogs, right, to generate all the electricity that we need. Now, this seems like a problem. Now, the first idea that might come to mind is, well, we could use children instead of frogs, right? I mean, they're bigger, they're easier to catch. Presumably, they have more electricity in them. So, you know, there are ways around the frog problem. But then you have the problem of getting the children to agree to this plan. So it would be better. Nick?
Did this only work on dead frogs? Or
No, you can have live frogs. Yeah, it works fine. In fact, the next guy I'm going to tell you about, actually, his background wasn't in anatomy and physiology the way Galvani's was, and so he wasn't accustomed to dissecting and working with dead animals. So he actually used live animals for the most part. But it'd be better if you could get around the animal problem altogether. And that's exactly what the next guy I'm going to tell you about, Volta, decides to try and do. So let's leave Galvani and go to Alessandro Volta. Excuse me.
Is his last name where we get voltage? Volt?
Yep, exactly. He is why we talk about volts. And if Galvani had made the discovery that Alessandro Volta made, then we would be talking about 120 galvans, right? Yeah. Troy.
What were his dates?
Dates are 1745 to 1827. Yeah, he lived a long time. Now, Volta, in contrast to Galvani, Volta was a physicist, and he knew a lot about electricity, and he was interested in it. I mean, he had studied all the guys that we've studied in this course, Gray and Dufay and Franklin, and Volta was generally of the opinion that biologists should stick to biology and leave physics to the physicists. He thought that Galvani's experiments were absolutely fascinating, but he didn't like Galvani's interpretation in terms of animal electricity. Volta thought there was something else going on. And, I mean, he started out just repeating Galvani's experiments. And as I said, he generally used live animals, but found that he really could get muscle contractions by attaching different metals across a muscle. He convinced himself that Galvani was really on to a major discovery here, but he just didn't believe in Galvani's interpretation. Now one interesting thing that I have to tell you about that Volta did, he took grasshoppers, chopped their heads off, and then hooked, say, a tin wire and a silver wire to different ends of the grasshopper, and he could make the grasshopper sing, twitch its legs, rub its legs together and sing. So he thought that was pretty amusing to make a headless grasshopper chirp. So anyway, I mean, that's he certainly convinced himself that Galvani was onto something. Now, one of the things Volta, yes, Daniel.
Question before you move on. You said how he repeated most of the experiments live, with live animals.
Yeah.
Did he copy the human one and use a live human?
No, he never did that. Yeah, it's. I mean, the trouble is you have to stick these wires into people to make it work, and most people just wouldn't go for that. Now, one of the things that Volta thought of doing was he took a silver coin, a small silver coin, and he put it on some tin foil and then wrapped the tin foil around and stuck it in his mouth. Okay, so he's got his tongue against one side of his tongue, the bottom of his tongue, say, is against the silver coin. The top of his tongue is against the tin foil. And he noticed a sour taste. And that was and a tingling. And he convinced himself, well, the electricity's flowing here. So all he has is, silver on one side of his tongue and tin on the other side, and he's getting a little electric current. So now, in that case, of course, he's still using live tissue, so he hasn't disproven Galvani's animal electricity theory, but it occurs to Volta that maybe all you really need is some sort of wet, appropriate wet material between the two different metals. Maybe you don't really need an animal at all. And he decides to test this idea, that what's important here are the two different metals, not the animal. And so he picks up on the idea, what Galvani had discovered, that you need two different metals. It doesn't work if you use the same metal. And Volta seizes on that as the really important fact. And now he's going to try to throw away the animal altogether and still generate electricity. So he ends up doing that. And here's Volta's let me just describe to you what Volta does to generate electricity now. He finds that if you have, say, a disk of silver and another disk of, say, zinc, another metal, and in between them you just take a piece of cardboard that you have soaked in a salt solution. Okay, so yeah, this is Volta worked on this a long time. He worked on this for years, and I'm, jumping to basically what his final discovery was here. But he takes, so in between his two metals, he's got cardboard soaked in salt solution. So it's in salt water. Actually, that's probably. And lo and behold, if he attaches a wire to to this metal plate and another one to this metal plate, he can get, he touches these two wires, he can get a tingling sensation like he gets from a Leyden jar that's, mildly charged up. If he brings the two wires really close together, he can get a little spark. So if he attaches, say, if he has a Leyden jar over here, okay, here's my Leyden jar. If say he attaches one wire to the inside of the Leyden jar and this other wire to the outside, he can charge up the Leyden jar. So obviously he's generating electricity here. And he's gotten rid of the animal altogether. So I mean, this is the most conclusive proof imaginable that Galvani's idea of, a special, that he had discovered a special electricity associated with the bodies of animals is wrong, because here you can get rid of the animal and get the same effect. Daniel.
I know you said you were skipping a couple years, but what made him decide to put it in salt water instead of just water?
Oh, I mean, he tried. If he tried pure distilled water, it didn't work. Okay, I mean, he just found by a lot of trial and error exactly what worked and what didn't work. And now it doesn't have to be a salt solution. It turns out if you have some acid solution, I mean, let's say you had lemon juice, that would work. But it can't just be pure distilled water. Yes, true.
Does the size of the cardboard matter, or could it just be made out of thick?
It does. It does make some difference. It's better not to have it too thick, actually. Yeah. So basically, what he would do is take, fairly thin cardboard and soak it good in salt water or some, acid solution, like lemon juice or something, whatever. And then he would have, he used actually these about 1-inch discs of silver and zinc. And if he wanted a more electricity, he found he could stack these things and have one after another. So, for instance, he didn't have to just have what I've drawn here. If he wants it to generate lots of electricity, when he finally published his result, this is actually what he suggested. If you want to generate a large flow of electricity, he says, well, take a whole stack of these things. So you have silver, and you have your cardboard, and then you have, so let me just abbreviate silver with S and zinc with Z. And then he says put that on another disc of silver, and then do cardboard. And then zinc. And then do silver again, cardboard, zinc. So you could have a whole stack of these things. You could have 20 plates, all stacked on top of one another, and then just hook up the top one with one wire, and the bottom one to the other wire, and then you'll get a lot more electric charge in your Leyden jar. Now, it wasn't very long before, as soon as Volta published this, of course, other physicists and anyone who was interested in electricity immediately went out and made their own apparatus like this. And of course, people quickly found out that, well, we can generate even more electricity, if we use bigger plates. People built large apparatus, in huge stacks like this. And so they could actually generate a big flow of electricity. Okay, now, what is this called, by the way, today? Daniel. Well, what we're getting out of it is electric current. But does anyone know what this invention is called? Me. A battery. This is the electric battery. Volta was the inventor of the electric battery.
Did he actually invent it, or did it just complete up to it?
Hmm?
Did he actually invent the battery, or did that just pretty much make it?
Well, this is a battery. He didn't make the kind of batteries that we have today. But this is, basically the batteries that you're used to seeing are based on this exact same principle. All inside those batteries, there is basically triple layers of different substances. There's one substance, and then a separating substance that plays the role of this cardboard soaked in salt solution, and then there's another conducting substance of a different kind than the first one. All batteries work on that same principle. They're different materials than silver and zinc, but it's the exact same principle. Drew.
Batteries eventually wear out. So do those eventually wear out?
Exactly. Yeah, they will. If Volta were to say, let's get rid of the Leyden jar here, and he just connects his top plate to his bottom plate and lets the electricity just keep flowing. Eventually, it will run down and the electricity will stop flowing. And when that happens, he'll see there's been some physical changes that went on in these plates. They changed color. The silver became darkened. And at a certain point, the current will just stop flowing. Yeah?
Can you ever recharge the silver and the zinc, or no? Once it's
This battery that Volta invented is not rechargeable like today's batteries. You could take it apart now and polish the surfaces again, put it back together, and it would run some more. But you'd have to do some work on it. Okay. Let's, let me go ahead and finish what I was writing here. Now, this is one of the most important inventions in all of history. And it's amazing when you stop and think about it, what Volta has done here. Because what we had before, the only way we could generate electricity was by vigorously rubbing materials, right? And then getting them charged up, and then if we wanted to try and transfer that electricity to another object, that would happen in an instant, and then the flow of electricity would just stop. Here, we don't have to rub anything, and we get a continuous flow of electricity. I mean, for a long time. I mean, not a split second, but days until this thing, runs down. So, I mean, if it's a big enough battery, it could take a long time to run down. Now, that is, that makes the study of the flow of electricity really possible for the first time, because before all we had were little, an instant flow, and it was over. And no rubbing, like I said. I mean, here Volta has just, all he's done is put certain combinations of materials together and then just hook them up and let them go. So it's, so what is happening here to create this electricity? Somehow it's a property of certain materials. If you find the right combination of materials, put them together in the right arrangement, they automatically generate electricity. Now, Volta didn't know how this worked, and I'm actually not going to tell you how it works until later. Yeah, Troy.
Are there different materials that work better than others?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good question. I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what Volta actually was able to discover, what he knew. It turns out to really understand what goes on in a battery, you need to know a lot of chemistry, and we haven't talked about chemistry yet. And that'll be later in the class. So by the time the year's over, you'll understand how a battery works. But for now, you're going to have to be satisfied with basically what Volta knew, which wasn't too much. But let me tell you what Volta, the kind of research he did do to see what results he got from different materials. Obviously, I've told you I've given you his best battery, actually, silver and zinc. But he didn't just immediately try silver and zinc. There's lots of different metals to try, right? So he tried a bunch of them, and what he found was there's a certain sequence of metals, and he gives it as this: zinc, tin, lead, iron, copper, platinum, gold, and silver.
Is that the order of how good from
Now, and here's what this list means. Volta discovered that the two metals that you use to make your battery, the further apart they are on this list, the better they'll work. Okay, Ben?
Back then, was platinum worth a lot?
I don't know how, I'm sure it was rare, relatively rare compared to, iron, copper, those are very common. It may not have been quite as rare as it is today. It's very expensive if you need platinum for your experiments today. But So notice, I mean, you can see from this list why Volta's best batteries used zinc and silver. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum. Now, if he used gold and silver, what would happen? Neat. Right. You still get a little bit of electricity out of it, but it's very weak. And same thing if you use iron and copper. It's just a weak battery. So the further apart you are on the list, the stronger electric current you get. Okay. Troy.
Did he ever vary the in-between material between the metals?
Yeah, he did. He used different types of salt solution, and I think he did use certain acidic solutions too, and he found that they both worked. And he doesn't go into a lot of detail on that in his paper, so I'm not sure how many different kinds of solutions he tried. Yeah.
If he put an animal in between, would it work the same as it would with the soap salt solution?
Yeah, I mean, if he took a frog, say, and just squeeze the juices out of it, he could, and then put that in some water and threw his pieces of cardboard in and soaked them in it. That would work fine. I mean, that's one of the reasons the animals worked for Galvani, is that I mean, we have a lot of salts in our body, and that's one of the things that makes us conductors. The reason electricity flows through us. You see, I mean, the animal bodies in Galvani's experiments were just serving the purpose of this soaked cardboard, basically. It was it's the salts in our bodies that make us conductors, and so the electricity can flow. Okay. Now, let me, well, here's one more type of battery that Volta describes in his paper that's an easy battery to make. One thing that Volta did was he took a bunch of cups and filled them up with some salt solution. So salt water, say. And then he took wires of silver and zinc and soldered them together so that he had, like, each little wire that he made was half silver and half zinc. Okay. And let's see, so and then he connects all his cups. So
zinc mix.
Yeah. Let's see, is that right? So yeah. And then if you hook the opposite cups together, you get a flow of electricity here.
What if you
Yeah,
have
try.
that wire be?
Hmm?
What if you have that wire be?
Oh, actually, it doesn't matter. It can be anything. But any conductor, basically. But just to, I suppose we could finish it off by making it that. And then if you bring these two wires close together, you'll get a spark, or you can use it to charge up Leyden jars or something. It's the same. It's just a different arrangement, but it works on the same principle as the battery that I drew the first time. Yeah.
Is this a much lesser battery than the other, than the stacked batteries?
Yeah, I actually think this one wouldn't be as strong because you get more metal surface with the metal discs than you do using metal wires like this. So this battery wouldn't generate as much current as the other one.
Would the first battery work without the cardboard?
Yeah, it could work without, you don't really need the cardboard. What you really need is the salt solution. So the cardboard was there just to basically soak up the salt solution and keep the discs apart. That's what Volta ended up finding out. So yeah, the cardboard wasn't a key ingredient there, Troy.
If you could just freeze some salt water and put it in between there and keep it really cold, would it work too?
Oh, if it were frozen, it wouldn't work so well. It turns out that there are things moving around in this liquid solution, and it's important that they be free to move around. So, right, freezing it wouldn't, that would be a good experiment to try, though. Do you have another question? Okay. So this is, like I said, I mean, this is really pretty remarkable that now, without rubbing at all, people have found a way to generate electricity just with the right combination of materials. And what's happening here, I mean, as we'll see after we learn some chemistry, and then I finally explain exactly how this works. I mean, what's happening here is that there's a chemical reaction going on that is generating this electricity. And that's why that gets back to Drew's question about, well, will it run forever? No, because eventually, I mean, what's happening here is that those observable changes, for instance, in the silver darkening or something, well, there's something happening to that silver. And eventually, the chemical reaction, say, gets complete, and then it won't generate any more electricity. So, but there's what we have here is we've arranged a certain chemical reaction that actually produces electricity for as long as the reaction continues. And scientists were able to figure that out. They knew something was going on, with the chemistry here. They figured that out pretty quickly. They just didn't know what. Okay, now, the next thing I want to tell you about is some experiments that, right at this point, people can now generate fairly large electric currents. In the years after Volta, there were improvements in these batteries. They made big ones, huge stacks. And so they could generate strong electric currents that would run for a long time. And then they could start actually investigating the way electricity worked when you could generate, when you could keep it moving for a long time. They could actually start studying moving electricity, which they never could do before. And one of the things that people thought to look into and start investigating was whether or not there was some connection between electricity and magnetism. Now, so far, everything I've told you, these two have been, they were discovered together back in ancient Greece, but they've really, all the discoveries I've told you about have either been discoveries about electricity or discoveries about magnetism, and I haven't really shown you any connection between the two, right? Now, at this point, remember that the way scientists had started thinking about electricity and magnetism was in terms of these separate fluids, right? Electricity was one fluid, magnetism was another fluid. According to Coulomb, there were these, little tiny magnets in magnetic materials like iron that were separate from the electric fluid. So, if you believe that theory, you don't really expect to find a connection between electricity and magnetism. But not everybody believed that theory. And there were certain clues that made people think maybe there is a connection between the two. One of the first clues they got was there was a guy in England who had his house hit by lightning. And in the corner of his house that actually got hit by the lightning, he had a box full of old iron or steel utensils, knives, forks. And after the lightning hit, he found that some of them would stick together. They were magnetized. They hadn't been before. So somehow the lightning had caused these, iron knives of this guy's to become magnets. Now, what is lightning? Lightning is just an electrical discharge, a huge electrical discharge. But why would a huge bolt of electricity landing close to, say, an iron knife magnetize the knife? There was no explanation for that, but it did seem to show that there's some connection between electricity and magnetism. And that's the next discovery that I'll tell you about this afternoon. We're done, right? It's okay. I thought 9:15 was when we ended. So, and this, the guy I'm going to tell you about this afternoon, Ørsted, who discovered this connection between electricity and magnetism. This is one of the great discoveries in the history of science that made all of modern technology possible. So we're getting into some good stuff.